Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight we have a public hearing of the Public Utilities Committee of Columbus City Council. Before we begin, I want to thank everyone for their preparation for today's hearing, specifically Public Utilities Assistant Director John Lee and representative from the department. Thanks for being here tonight. I also want to thank Steve Gladman, who chairs the Sewer and Water Advisory Board for us, for informing us of the proposed 2022 utility rate adjustments here that we'll get into during the bulk of the hearing. I also want to thank members of the public who've tuned in tonight and those who've joined us in council chambers or virtually online to learn more about this process. The purpose of this hearing is to review and comment on the proposed year 2022 utility rate adjustments for the City of Columbus and Central Ohio customers. We'll also discuss the department's payment assistance programs for low-income residents and seniors who may qualify reduced rates, as well as those who have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This hearing is streaming live on the city's Facebook and YouTube pages and is being conducted via WebEx. The video will also be posted on the City of Columbus YouTube channel following the event. It is now my distinct pleasure to turn over the mic to the Sewer and Water Advisory Board Chair, Steve Gladman. Steve?
Thank you, Chairman Dorrance. I sent you a letter, and you and President Harding previously, that summarizes our recommendations, and with your permission, I'll read that for the record.
Please, Chair.
Members of the Sewer and Water Advisory Board met with representatives of the Department of Utilities 4 times in 2021 to review and discuss the operations and project planning activities of the water, sewer, and stormwater enterprises. At our October 6 meeting, we reviewed the proposed water, sanitary, sewer, and stormwater rates. The board approved the following rate recommendations effective 1 January 2022. For the fiscal year 2022, the board recommends an increase in sanitary sewer rates of 5%, water rates of 4%, and stormwater rates of 3%. When considered together, the bill impact on an average residential customer within the City of Columbus is 4.49%. Overall, this adds approximately $13.60 in charges to a residential customer bill each quarter, or $54.40 a year. Over the past few years, the board has not raised the extra strength charges per recommendations from our rate study. The board recommends no additional increase in these charges in 2022. The board recommends continuing the surcharge within the sanitary sewer rates known as the Clean River Fee to support payment of expenses related to the construction of projects mandated by the consent orders entered into to eliminate combined sewer and sanitary sewer overflows. This charge is based on measured impervious surface areas. The equivalent residential unit equals 2,000 square feet of impervious surface area, and each residential customer, both inside the city and outside the city, is billed 1 ERU per month. Commercial and industrial customers are charged based on the actual measured impervious area. That impervious area is updated periodically to pick up changes in structures and so forth. The board also recommends continuing the low-income discount for water and sanitary sewer commodity charges at 20%. Low-income customers are defined as being at 150% of the federal poverty level or qualifying for a state low-income program. The Department of Public Utilities is continuing its outreach efforts to identify customers that have not taken advantage of the low-income program. Lastly, the board recommends no increase for sewer and water capacity charges for 2022. The board feels that the rate adjustments are fair and equitable and are necessary to provide the funding to support the day-to-day operations of the division, as well as continuing support of critical and sizable capital improvement programs within the Department of Utilities. As always, the board will work with the public utility staff to ensure that future rate increases are minimized to the extent possible. If you or other members of council have any questions, please feel free to contact me.
Thank you, Chair Gladman. I'd now like to turn the mic over to Assistant Director John Lee for a presentation on these rates as well. Assistant Director?
Good evening, Councilmember Dorrance and members of council. My name is Jonathan Lee, Assistant Director with the Department of Public Utilities. I have a short slide presentation for us. If we could go to that first slide. There we go. Our proposed rates for 2022, as you can see, are 4% for water, 5% for sewer, and 3% for storm, with an overall increase of 4.49%. The average residential bill increase, assuming 30 CCFs, which would be a household of 4 or more, is about $13.60. Annually, that would be about $54.40. As Chairman Gladman mentioned, we are going to continue our low-income and discount and senior discount programs. And I wanted to provide a little bit of history. You can see in 2020, our rates were somewhat similar. We had 3% for water, 3% for sewer, 2% for storm. And then in 2021, we backed down a little bit just due to the pandemic. Our projections for this time a year ago for 2022 were not too far off as we presented them to the board. I wanted to show a little bit about the differences between inside city and outside city or suburban customers, as well as the bill impact for low income, and also show the difference between a bill from a 30 CCF family to a household that's consuming 17 CCFs. You can see there the difference in the bill. I'll highlight the residential and the inside. As I mentioned, the $13.60 on a quarterly increase, it goes down to about $8.80 would be the increase for a smaller household. The low-income customers, residential customers, get a discount on their commodity charge, and you can see there that their bill is reduced. Overall, they would see an 11.42 quarterly increase. A little bit smaller household, about $7.58. And then the outside city customers, we charge a multiplier on those outside city customers to serve them. They would be seeing about a $15.06 quarterly increase. Smaller household, about a $9.78 quarterly increase. Sometimes the outside suburban communities also add an additional surcharge for their capital improvements within their jurisdiction. Some of the factors that we like to review whenever we are putting the rate increases together and presenting them to the board are, number one, what type of revenue, how much revenue do we need to cover our costs? What are our costs for our operations and maintenance expenditures? Those things such as personnel, supplies, services, capital costs, and debt service. Also, our capital improvement program is it's a very important component of our rate increase factors. Our 6-year capital improvement program totals $2.95 billion, and recently, inflation considerations have been a major factor with our capital improvement program for supplies and materials, as well as on the O&M side as well. Maintaining adequate reserves and operating fund cash balances is also very important and tied into the process of determining rates. Maintaining financial ratios such as cash on hand and what our debt service coverage ratio is very important to rating agencies as they review our financial condition. And also affordability, a very big component. What is the impact on residents? What is the impact on all residents and commercial customers, residential customers, low-income customers across the board? What are our delinquency rates? How are we seeing changes with those? Those all come into context. And finally, complying with our regulatory requirements has been and always continues to be a primary driver for our rate increases. So overall, a summary, these are across-the-board rate increases. We're not doing anything with any particular component of the rate structure. Those percentages that I mentioned in the first slide will be across the board, apply to all customers, residential, commercial, master meter customers, as well as multifamily. No extra strength changes in extra strength charges, no changes in our water and sewer capacity fees. All of our rates are in line with our cost of service studies, which we do every 2 years or so. Just to give you some perspective on what the rate increases will likely generate as far as additional revenue on the sewer side, We're likely to receive around $10.9 million, water $6.5 million, and storm $1.1 million. At this time, whenever we're generating our rate increases and making those forecasts, we look at our financial condition. And just to give you an update on that, through October 2021, compared to prior years, we're actually down on revenue and on the sewer side. Water is up slightly, but not where we've been in the past. And storm is down as well. A lot of it is driven by a decrease in water consumption. You can see there that water consumption through October is down 2.9%. Account growth has been pretty steady. We're about this level at this point. Each year, we don't really exceed 0.5%. Delinquencies has also been a factor just due to the pandemic, and I'll talk about some of the programs we have in place to help customers with those delinquencies. And also, to give you some perspective during this time, we're also presenting our operating budget for our water, sewer, and storm divisions, and we're developing our capital plan. Debt service has continued to be a driver, as mentioned before, but O&M on the water side, chemical costs have really been increasing quite a bit due to supply chain issues, and so that's a primary driver of that 8.76 increase. Also, with our residuals program, we're in the stage now on our water side where we have to manage the byproduct of water treatment. Alum and lime is a byproduct of our water treatment process, and we're looking towards storing those, a means to move those and apply those to farmers' fields and other applications. And so there's a cost to doing that. We're starting that up here, as well as looking at a fourth water plant placement to serve the growing region here. So on the sewer side, not so much of an increase in the operating and maintenance budget, but again, debt service continues to be a driver there with our Blueprint Columbus program that you're familiar with, and we're recently engaged in a new tunnel project here in the downtown area. Our capital plan there, just briefly, that's in review right now for the next 6 years is around $2.9 billion. This slide here I like to show to give viewers an idea of where we have been in the past, where we are now, and where we plan to be in the future as far as our rate increases. Back in 2003 to 2009, that era was right when we were starting our consent order. Rate increases were high then, and we didn't really engage much in the Ohio EPA loan program. We've really got a good relationship with the Ohio EPA. They provide great low-interest loans for our construction program. And so you can see there from around 2013 up to this point, our rates have been pretty steady, pretty level with inflation. We are increasing those. As you can see, we're bumping up a little bit higher is our forecast in 2022 through 2025, but then we're going to kind of level off again. As I mentioned, those drivers for that, largely the water's residuals plan, the fourth water plant, which can cost upwards of $300 million. Our consent order projects, which we continue to comply with, which we'll be complying with for many, many years out to 2040, 2045. The Lower Olentangy Tunnel, another project is mentioned, which we're underway. That's close to a $300 million project as well. So building up the rates now at a reasonable level that are reasonable and affordable allows us to do these large projects and maintain our infrastructure to a high quality. I wanted to give viewers some perspective on where our rates stand in relation to some other regional utilities. We're not isolating alone. We're very much in line, if not lower, than a lot of communities around us. You can see there, Cleveland, we're close, very close with Cleveland water rates, but Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Indianapolis are all higher than us as far as water rates. Not too far below us is Cincinnati, Louisville. So we're pretty much right in the middle. But we've done that by keeping our rates low, but making major investments in our water plants, which we've made in the last 3 years. All of our water plants have been upgraded. They continue to receive upgrades. So doing that with low rates in mind. On the sewer side, even lower. And fortunately, we started our consent order compliance well in advance of a lot of these other communities, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, St. Louis. That's why we're so much lower than them. Plus, they have different structures as well. They may sell different types of bonds. They may do different financing structures. But overall, our rates are very much in line, and if not, in fact, lower than most other communities. I wanted to close my presentation with some discussion on our low-income programs and our new assistance programs that we have in place here in 2021. Our low-income and senior discount program, we've had that in place for a long time. That continues. We still continue to get good participation in that. That's a 20% discount on our water and sewer commodity charges. Seniors also get a reduction. They get their fixed service charge waived. It's also available for master metered and suburban communities outside of Columbus. We will actually work with those customers to apply those discounts for them, as well as multifamily. You can see here how things have changed. It's really not a whole lot of change through the pandemic. If anything, we've seen a slight increase in more senior participation in 2021. Low-income residents have been pretty flat, and we haven't really noticed a whole lot of delinquencies with this population either. Speaking of delinquencies, I wanted to highlight some programs that we've had in place. We've had, since the CARES dollars, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, better known as the CARES Act, was in place in 2020. We started a program with $2.5 million, and we've been drawing that down. To date, we've given about $1.4 million in total relief across 3,623 accounts. What this program does is allows a one-time payment of up to $750 towards a bill, a delinquent bill. You have to be 90 days delinquent, and those can add up. So that $750 really helps out. There are certain criteria that's been in place for our low-income program, but also part of that program to qualify is proof of job loss or some type of reduction in income due to the pandemic. So that was a new qualifying factor really targeted towards that program. So we're going to continue that program into 2022 and perhaps beyond if there's still additional dollars. New program we have in place, just put in place, is for our small business customers. These are for small businesses only, not large businesses. And what we do is provide a one-time matching grant of 50% of the past due amount for any other types of bills that they have, up to a maximum of $5,000. And there's some qualifiers there: 90 days delinquent. One thing is that they need to have employees between 2 and 25. So we're really focusing in on the small business, and that $5,000 is what we feel a good amount to really provide them some relief on those utility bills. We've got a link there up on the screen where customers can go. That's probably the best place to go. They could always call our customer service number and fill out the application through that link. With that, Chairman, I will close my presentation and answer any questions about the material I presented today.
Thank you, Assistant Director. I have a couple of questions, and I will direct them to you. And certainly, if Chair Gladman has anything to share on the topic, certainly want to allow him an ability to add some remarks as well. So first things first. So just talking about the rates themselves, these are consistently sort of in line with what we've seen before, but they are slightly higher than we've seen. Certainly coming off last year. Is there any specific driver on the rates being a little bit higher this year compared to what we've seen the years past? Not dramatically different, but certainly a little bit higher.
A little bit higher, yes, Mr. Chairman. A little bit higher, largely due, number one, to inflation. That was a big factor, and we've seen inflation really creep up here in 2021. And as far as increased construction costs, increased chemical costs, electricity costs, energy types of costs have really increased substantially. And also some of the acceleration, as I mentioned, of the fourth water plant, looking at that and getting that online sooner. The increase in delinquencies and the loss of revenue and the decrease in consumption also play a factor in the rate increases. But as mentioned, as noted, we don't anticipate rate increases much much above this. If not, we'll step up to a new tier where we're maintaining this level of rate increase.
Thank you. And speaking of that consistency, one of the questions I continually get from members of the community is that, hey, every single year we see increases on these rates. Why can't we press pause? Why can't we do this every 2, 5, or 10 years? What would be the result if, say, hey, we're going to press pause on raising rates for the next couple of years because of X, Y, and Z that's happened in our community? How would that affect the ratepayers if rather than every year us addressing this, we delayed that by, say, 2, 4, or 5 years?
Mr. Chairman, if we delayed it, we put things on pause, that could have a potential impact of what they call rate shock on residents, residential customers, and commercial customers. Some communities do that. Some communities have it in their code, their charter, where that's what they do. They pass rate increases every few years. We've looked at that, and we look at more of a strategy of lower, steady rate increases year over year to kind of go in line with income levels. So that's pretty much our position. Plus, it also shows whenever we deal with our rating agencies, our strong financial position and our ability to continue to be aware and raise rates annually to maintain that good credit quality and maintain our bond ratings.
Thank you. On a similar topic, and Chair Gladman, feel free to weigh in on this as the chair of the board that's sort of the public oversight for this topic. We've talked a lot about sort of inputs and outputs and how we sort of get to where we're at today, the numbers where they're at. I was wondering, Director, if you could just take another moment to talk about how do we arrive at this number, right? How do we think through what are all the drivers and inputs that we come to when we think about, what is the amount that we need to increase, water or sewer, in order to keep pace with, again, the capital program, keep pace with the services that we need to offer, while all that needs to happen, while at the same time making sure that we are raising the minimums, the bare minimum that we need to keep pace with things. Because there's that tension, right, between making sure that we're maintaining and building what we need to, but at the same time making sure we're being sensitive to any types of increase of prices in our community at a time in which many folks have had financial instability over the past 2 years.
Yeah, Chairman Dorans, that really is the balance. It is somewhat of an equation, I guess you could say. Balancing our capital plan, which is really what's driving a lot of the increase, because we go out, we debt finance, we have to pay that debt service back every year. Our operations and maintenance expenditures don't really increase year over year, but for certain years, which, as I mentioned, we might have a new program in place, but our personnel expenses is pretty steady. Overall, our O&M is pretty steady year over year. So really the drivers that really impact the rate increases are changes to our capital plan and revenue. Revenue, as far as the revenue coming in, and that's a very sensitive component, I guess you could say, of the equation or the model. And so what we do, again, is look to see what all these components, how they all work together whenever we're crafting our rate increases. We present things to the board about the new initiatives we want to do, and then finding that balance, can we afford this? If it's too much, if it's going above 10%, 15%, what do we need to do to taper that back down?
And one follow-up on that, one of the things we've talked about in this committee before is that decrease in revenue from consumption, right? And we've seen, certainly office hours in downtown Columbus for the past year being at a quarter or half capacity of what they're normally at. Those are large customers sort of ours. How do we, sort of project that out into the future? How, as far as like thinking through future years, how that sort of consumption, which is a key component as you just talked about, as far as how that equates to raising these rates. Do we have any kind of feeling about where that's moving forward based upon what we've seen this past year?
I think that this past year is a bit of an anomaly, and I think there's a point, there's kind of a bottom, I guess you could say, where we've got account growth, as I demonstrated. There's buildings, there's people moving into the city, there's jobs here, apartments and new homes are being built. So there is a level there where consumption is not really going to go below. People can only install so many, water efficient types of fixtures. They can forego this and that as far as, to save things. So it is definitely a factor in our rate modeling, I guess you could say. But we view 2020 and 2021 as far as our changes in consumption, really due to the pandemic, and almost we kind of look before that and see what the trends were when we're looking out into the future, and almost discount this pandemic and not build it into our trend for forecasting, because it's such an outlier based on the current conditions.
And I would imagine it's fair to say the population increase that Columbus has experienced and is expecting to experience, that is one of the key primary drivers of the revenue generation of that consumption.
Exactly, and I think as we continue to see new homes come on board and folks getting into those homes and consuming water, things may change. Our revenue position in 2023 and 2024 could increase substantially, which would result in us reviewing our rates again and potentially tempering them down.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have, and certainly Chair Gladman, I want to give you an opportunity if you had anything else that you wanted to mention at this point.
Thank you, Chair. The questions you ask are the same questions that the board asks the staff on a regular basis. I mean, we look at the reserve level. Is it too high, too low? We look at those capital needs going out. We look at the amount of debt that's going to be needed. The department and the auditor's office did a wonderful job of refinancing the debt and keeping that a number as low as possible. So I think it's a very thoughtful process that comes with this. No one likes to see rate increases, obviously, but I think the department does a good job of providing the information that we request. Consumption, our last meeting we had a conversation about if we were going to see increased high-tech companies that use a tremendous amount of water because of servers and so forth, what impact that will have. And the department's already started modeling, what that would be. So I think they're very proactive in the approach. And the board consistently asks about the low-income discount program, and there was conversation about could we increase the percentage based on the participation rates, and that's something that we'll be looking at for next year. And some of the things in the future, like monthly billing, which we've talked about, I think will be very helpful for lower income households. It's a better management tool. So I think there's a lot of things on the horizon that are positive.
Thank you, Chair Gladman. I think it's important to recognize the role of the board. I mean, that is citizen representatives that are reviewing these things, working with the department to make sure that there's, not just council reviewing these rates as elected, representatives of the city, but also we have, folks that are working directly with the department as, Chair Gladman's the suburban representative. So when you talk about the difference in rates between the city of Columbus residents and those that we serve in some of the suburban communities, there's a direct representative of those communities that sit on this board to make sure that, any changes are fair sort of across the board as well. So just want to pause and make sure that folks that may be watching us online are aware of sort of the role of that board and the importance of it, to make sure that there's, sort of multiple eyes on this as it moves through the process, and continue to work with the great folks within the department on, coming up with these rates, and to Chair Gladman's point, thinking through policy things like, the low-income discount program and how sort of broad and deep you can sort of have those things be offered for, many folks in our community that, desperately need that kind of support. So again, thank you, Chair Gladman, for your service, and certainly the other members of the board for taking the time out of their lives to serve that vital part of the department's role here. So this is normally where we come to public testimony for this hearing. But as of the beginning of this hearing, we had not received any speaker slips for it. So I'm going to move past the public testimony portion and just go ahead and start to close out the hearing. So again, just want to thank everyone who's joined us here tonight. Certainly everyone at the Department of Public Utilities that prepared for this hearing, especially Assistant Director Lee, Chairman Gladman of the Sewer and Water Advisory Board, my staff, and certainly Mark Carter and the others from council staff for getting this hearing put together. Appreciate the thorough explanation, Assistant Director, of how we sort of got to where we got to. I think it's important for members of the public to know that these numbers are real, that it's in response to everything that we've seen over the past 2 years and sort of projecting forward, and certainly really with an eye on that tension between what do we need to do in order to maintain sort of our capital program to make sure folks are getting access to clean and safe drinking water, while at the same time making sure that we're not burdening residents with higher bills if we don't need to. If folks are interested in learning more, I encourage them to visit the Department of Public Utilities website at www.columbus.gov/utilities, or they can call 614-645-8276. Folks can also get a hold of me anytime at radorns, D-O-R-A-N-S, at columbus.gov. That's generally the easiest way to get a hold of me at City Council. As these ordinances currently stand, ordinance number 2722-2021 will enact new water rates. Ordinance number 2724-2021 will enact new sanitary sewer service rates. And ordinance number 2725-2020 enacting new stormwater fees and rates were on our council agenda last night for first reading and will appear for passage at the next Columbus City Council meeting that will be held this Monday, November 22nd at 5 p.m. And with that, appreciate everyone's attention on this topic tonight, and this hearing is adjourned.